Welcome back. Today we're going to take a quick look at the Effect Audio CLEOPATRA 2 OCTA cable, which is this guy right here. So first I want to thank Effect Audio. They put this cable on a tour, let people get their hands on it, get a quick feel for it, and move on to the next person. So brilliant idea. Kind of a pricey cable. It's about $1,500, so it's nice to have the opportunity to get your hands on it before you would consider purchasing a cable like this. So let's start with the gear that's already hooked up here. So I am a hobbyist type, and occasionally I like to measure cables, see what their impedance works out to be, and this one very low. So when you get down into the 0.15s to 0.16 area, those are pretty much the best that you're going to get on hobby cables, and maybe the best that you're going to get on a cheap multimeter like this. But the ones that hit the 0.15 tend to be very, very low impedance. And so just a very rough measure of, this thing is built quite well. This one is also in silver. Most of the silver cables that I've measured in the affordable range tend to be thin strands and not many strands, and those tend to not measure all that well. They measure very similar to what your standard stock cables would be, even in copper. Those are 0.33s and above, anywhere between 0.33 and 0.5. That's where your typical budget silver is going to be. To see one measuring this low kind of amazed me. Very surprising. I didn't actually think it was going to measure that low. When you combine that with the fact that this is a modular, two removable connections, and it's still measuring that low, that's kind of impressive to me. So yeah, I think generally, from the hobbyist point of view of cheap multimeter on cable, this one actually is kind of a top-notch cable, even for silver. It's very top-notch, at least in my small experience doing it. So let's get rid of some of the gear here and talk about the cable and what it looks like up close. So we look at the specs right here real quickly. Selected premium UPOCC ultra pure silver lits, proprietary dual geometric design, 26 gauge, 8 wires, individually enameled strands, flex insulation, connex and termex interchangeable connections like I just talked about. It's kind of a dual modular, so you can flip out the 4.4 for 3.3. You can unscrew that, and I'm not going to unscrew that. Or you can use their tool and actually remove, this is the basic kit, so this is the 2-pin, and there's also an MMCX in the package as well. But what's unique and what they talk about here is the dual geometric design. And you can definitely tell that there are two different style strands, and they're probably two different arrangements of silver strands. So I didn't see a whole lot of detail as to what was going on there, as to how they arrange each of the individual strands. But yeah, very cool. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's unique, but it's very different, and there's probably some intention and purpose behind the arrangement of the strands and why they did it that way. But so as you look at it, it actually feels like it's 8 core, so it is a bit thicker. For an 8 core, these strands are actually a little bit thicker too. They say 26 gauge. That's about, on the thicker side of 8 cores. You tend to run into problems with thicker 8 cores, kind of getting everything to fit inside the connections. So these connections not going to be the slimmest that you've run across, but built out a little bit to hold all 8 cores that are a bit thicker. And again, I think these are aluminum. I don't think they are. They're definitely lighter in weight than they appear to be. When you look at the cable online, you're like, wow, that is going to be a really heavy cable because of the strand size and the thickness of these connectors. But no, I think they actually did a really nice job of, getting connections that fit, that look great, but not all that heavy. And I think that balancing act is actually a little harder to do, and I think they actually pulled it off quite well. It's still a hefty cable, without a doubt, and I think when they talk about their proprietary ultra flex insulation, again, I think they actually pulled that off really well. They kind of threw it in there in the marketing bullets, but when you feel it in your hand and how pliable and flexible it is, and it doesn't really spring all that far and it doesn't spring out like some other springy cables would do, that's kind of a sign that the insulation is very soft, very flexible, pliable, kind of what I want in a cable. I don't like the ones that tend to be super springy, or they're going to spring into and tangle themselves up. This one is actually pretty good about that as well. So yeah, I think spec-wise, measurement-wise, I think this one is a kind of a top-notch bit there. So if I'm going to put on my believer hat, that cables tend to affect sound, and take a look at what they talked about in their marketing bit. So multi-brid, tri-brids, quad-brids, IEMs. I definitely ran through Dusk, Hydro, Cadenza, some of the more recent hybrids that I have. And they talk about the dual geometric cable structure exemplifies top-tier clarity. So I think when people talk about silver, they talk about it's going to be a little bit brighter. But, if I put my believer hat on, my first impression of the cable, it was pretty much dead on the clarity bit. It was a transparency to it. Very, very clear. I wouldn't say it's, radically different, but there was sort of a noticeable hits you with a bunch of clarity. And I think they actually nailed that quite well. Capturing a richness in the body. And I think that's where it gets a little bit harder. I think what comes through is the clarity and the transparency. It's kind of like wiping the window, kind of wiping the dust off the window. You have this clear picture of what's going on in your IEM, what's going on in your source. I think they got that when you dive into, the richness in the body and the mid to lower end, less aggressive and has a notable improvement in the low and mid end and mid performance. I think that's a little bit harder, but as far as the clarity, I'll buy that. The rest of it, I'd have to spend more time with it, and I don't have a ton of time to spend with it. But I will say that they kind of got that about right. So that's a quick one on the Effect Audio Cleopatra 2 Octa cable. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.